Oh shit, my battery just hit. Hold on a second. Let me plug in my power cord here.
Okay, well, we're live, Eric.
All right, fantastic. We're live. It is. Good timing. There we go. I'll just give you the one here.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Hello, everybody. Michael Johnson with Shockwave Defense, and I'm sitting here with my longtime friend, although we can't figure out how long. We were just trying to. Eric Knaus, also known as Top Dog in the Dog Brother community. Eric, let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you got started in the martial arts.
Well, who I am today is happily married, and I work in the IT field, and I continue to do martial arts. The way I got into martial arts in the very beginning was with Taekwondo. This is back in the that was in like the mid-late 70s, and got my black belt in that. And while I was doing that, I also got introduced to Piquete de Tercia, which is a Filipino stick fighting, and with Tom Bizio and Leo Gahi, and just got into stick fighting through them and full contact. Started actually with knife fighting with the fencing mask, which you see in is famous for, and then continued to. After I got my Taekwondo black belt, I kind of found that it was not as. I mean, it's great for certain things, but weaponry was really where my interest lay, and continued to develop that stick fighting. We did a lot of fighting, full contact through the 80s. And really broke a lot of rules and became quite an iconoclast during that period. And
how were people fighting back then, Eric?
People were, well, that was the issue. People were padding up. I mean, they looked like the Michelin Tire Man when they'd come out there with all their, the chest protector, the body protector, and they had the kendo masks. That was a big thing too. And to me, that was just unrealistic because you're not going to have that when you're out in the street or wherever. It's going to be just you and your weapon and no padding and none of that. And it's going to be your body movement, your knowledge, and your mindset. So we got rid of it, and that was really where the iconoclastic, and that was probably the biggest thing that set us apart originally. This is like the pre-Cambrian era of Dog Brothers, pre-Dog Brothers, because people thought, if you get hit, you'll get killed, you'll die, you'll this and that, and frankly, I just didn't believe it because no one had done it. So I said,
I don't know, let's try it.
Exactly. So I said what I did. So I said, the worst I can do is, the way I saw it, the worst I could do is get knocked in the head maybe and get a knot or, broken bone or something like that. But even that, I looked at the way people were swinging and practicing and training, and there was no way they could break your bone unless it was dead on center, and I was just being a chump and standing there, and which was not going to happen. So that we continue to do that, and I've had some really good training partners over the years, and you have a good training partner, that guy, and the two of you will evolve and train and grow and get better. And we were just breaking ground seemed like every week. If something happened, a technique would come along, we put it in our laboratory, and we found out what
your laboratory. What did the laboratory look like? Because all the laboratories I saw you in looked a lot like parks under bridges.
Well, a lot of them were parks, to be honest with you, and a lot of them were, like when I knew Dan Inosanto really well. This is one of my Torrance days.
It's getting harder to hear you, Eric.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. But I could hear Dan Inosanto was a good friend of mine, and so we went ahead and here it is. And so he gave me the keys to his dojo, and me and a couple of guys, Dave Wink was one of them, which shout out to him. And we would go there usually after work. We're like a midnight group, and then we would just start fighting. We'd pull out sticks typically, but so every now and then a guy would come in with nunchucks, a guy would come in with a staff, a guy would come in with some exotic weapon of some sort, and we'd say, let's try it. And oh, I'll do this and I'll do that, and yeah, I'm very open to anybody's claim of miracles or magic. And I'm like,
Is it true you guys were
I'm also,
moving the weapons off of Danny's walls as well?
yeah,
And, hey,
well,
let's
yeah,
try this.
well, we did that, and I would back then I was in sales. I did a lot of sales going up and down the coast, and I would go by these dojos, and I'd come in, and it was whether it was another Taekwondo school or Japanese Kung Fu, or they would do one of these, and I'd look on the wall and I'd say, because I'd be in town for that day, and I'd say, I see you have tunfas or nunchucks or whatever you have. Do you fire them? Oh yeah, we fire them all the time. I'm like, wow, great. And I go and look at them, and they have like an inch of dust on them. I'm like, okay, so not recently. Maybe another day you fought in them. But anyway, so that. But so I mean, probably 8 out of 10, 4 to 5 times, the guy would say that they did, and then you look at their students or you look at what was on display in the school, and they didn't. Or more often it was a kata, where you do a form or a dance, but it was never fighting. It was like fake fighting.
There's a specific mindset. I mean, because I started fighting, I don't remember when, 2010, 2011, something like that. And there's a mindset that you have to take going into these training events, right? Or training events, right? These research development labs.
Right.
And it was funny because at one point, in fact, I think it was the fight that you and I had with the mysock and the knife, that the news put it on television, and they actually said that it was a seminar, and that if you came to our seminar, you could get all bloodied like this guy. And they did like a close-up of your face, right? And then they're like, and they'll give you a free hamburger and a T-shirt. I couldn't get anybody to come to my seminars for like a year.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. I mean, yeah, I know. I looked something like out of a macabre Halloween set or something. So I remember that. But when you're bald like me, you kind of bleed easy. But yeah, the mindset you bring in there is. Well, there's a number of factors that involve. Number one, you have to be really into it. Number two is you just can't go in there with trepidation, fear, and that sort of thing, because the minute you bring that into anything, whether it's a fighting seminar or your life or whatever, you kind of set yourself up for failure as it is. And when you and I went for when you and I fought that one time against the mysox, I'd fought the mysox before, so I was, I kind of like, okay, I kind of knew what I was getting into. But there are other weapons that I had never fought before, like the whip that Tom, trying to remember his last name, but anyway, where I had to fight a whip, and man, before going into it, everyone's, oh my goodness, don't go with a whip, you got to get all padded up, and I'm like, maybe, but have you fought the whip? No, well then shut up. You know nothing.
So what
you know nothing.
Fighting the whip, when a whip hits human skin, what was it like? Because obviously you're probably one of the 5 people on the planet that can actually say, yeah, I had a guy hit that with really bad intentions, like try to come after me. What did it do to your skin when it hit you?
Tom Meadows, that's his name. Well, I mean, fortunately it didn't hit me, but I could sure see it. I could see what it could do, because if it did hit me, that's a knife. Basically, the very end of the tip of it is like like this long, and that is a knife. And if it hits, it'll cut through whatever flesh. I mean, certainly flesh, because I was watching him previous to that doing whipping the tree, and so he was just ticking off tree bark with that, and I'm like, if that'll do it with tree bark, it'll certainly do it with my flesh. And Mark, people were looking at that like, you sure you want to do this? I said, absolutely I want to do it, because I know I'm probably going to be one of the few people who have ever done it. Number one, that's I always like that,
right?
And the other one is, after looking at it, I fought nunchucks before, and I fought flexible weapons like 3-section nunchucks or 3-section staffs, and it's a flexible weapon. And whip is like an ultra flexible weapon, but it's flexible nonetheless. And the strategy is that while they're very daunting and intimidating and all that sort of thing, and if you get whipped with it, oh yeah, it'll cut. Like I said, it'll cut like a knife.
So your
But
strategy, what was your strategy though? How did
well,
you?
my strategy was, first of all, number one, stay just out of range. And you can tell because you can see the whip coming, and it's not like it's coming at light speed. It has a buildup. I mean, when the very end of it is, getting to that point, it accelerates, but you can see where it's coming after about the first, because it was the first whip when I fought 3 different whips. The first one was it was a 10-foot whip, and you could see, because it's a big motion as they go around the head. You can kind of tell where it's going to come. So I'm going to be just out of that range. And there were a couple of times when he just popped it. I think he kind of was trying to like fire a shot across my bow. So he popped it in front of me, and you could see it, and I could feel like this puff of air just hitting my chest. I'm like, okay, note to self, don't be in the way of that. But as soon as it happened, he had to bring it back. And a 10-foot whip is not designed for land being on the ground. It's designed for being on a horse or something higher where you have a time to recoil and bring it back. And so after like 2 or 3 of his pops, the third or whatever the next one was, as soon as it popped, I was right behind it and I closed. Yeah. And so, once you close in a whip, the guy has basically a dowel stick with his hand with a rope on it. That's useless, really, unless he has, I think, he can choke with it. No, not going to happen.
Yeah. And what did you have against him? What were you using?
Just a stick. I just had just my stick. I didn't wear any gloves. The only thing I wore was a fencing mask.
And your fencing mask isn't like the fencing mask that the guys are fighting with now, because I remember fighting with you, and you have it's almost like it lays on your face. It's not all protective and like a true fencing mask. It's like some aluminum foil.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a modified screen door that that I mean, because it's an old. I mean, and I got the idea when I was doing this at Columbia University, because where we practiced this was in the basement of where they let us do it pretty much. But there was also the same place at the other fencing. We had a fencing team at the school there, and they had these old beat up masks, and so we would just. I'd see him on there, and the guy I was training with at the time, Tom, he had 1 or 2, and I said, well, hey, let's just use these. And I asked the fencing coach, I said, do you mind if we use this? No, they're just, they would just thrash them anyway. So yeah, take 1 or 2. So we did, and they were already banged up when I got them. And you notice that, I had every now and then you have to kind of, push out the screen so it's not pressed against your face just when you put it on. Otherwise, when you put it on, you get a scratch. So you push it out. And so that's how, but I really, to be honest with you, Michael, I didn't want any more than that. Because, we started with, we had kendo masks. We had the fencing masks you see nowadays, which are, whatever you call them.
Genuine, because, and you see this now with the current stick fighting, that guys are getting bigger sticks because they're getting bigger masks, and they keep going. It just keeps escalating. They're getting bigger sticks to bigger masks to bigger sticks to bigger masks,
right?
And it's taking away from it.
Yeah, and that's an arms race, in my opinion, in the wrong direction. Because you're getting away from what you're actually trying to do. You're trying to get good with your weapon and not use your body armor as part of the weapon, because that's just not going to be around. I mean, if you're at a job site, hold on a second here. Let me kill that. If you're at a job site or just walking around, you're going to have what is the likelihood you're going to have all that armor to put on? You're probably going to have maybe an umbrella. If you're working on a job site, which I do a lot of contract work, you're going to see rebar. You're going to see different things that can qualify as a weapon.
But you can't go run to your phone booth and go switch on your fencing mask and your kendo uniform and all that.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So it has to be on the fly, usable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the thing you got to be just, aware of. I mean, why are you doing this? The question is, why do you do martial arts? Well, I want to be in shape. Okay, great. Then you can do that. Or I want to learn how to defend myself and protect my family. If you're going to go that direction, then you've got to get as close to that scenario as you can. And, if you're putting on armor, I mean, I can see putting on armor to some extent, particularly in the beginning, because, high attrition rate. people getting whacked or not coming back.
So Eric, I want to watch.
And,
I want to watch some of your. No, go ahead. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I say, and so I can see some the particularly the hand gear. If you're going to put something on your hands, I mean, I when I'm training people, I will put heavy gear, hands stuff on my hands because I mean, obviously I use my hands, but the reason is because I want them to get acclimated to it's okay to hit, especially women who are in there to train and learn defense. I said if you're not prepared to hit, then don't do this. And if you can't get over that, but that's a big hurdle. It's a societal hurdle. That you have to kind of just it's a speedway you have to get past. And so with women in particular, not so much with kids, believe it or not, but women and some men, I mean, especially the younger ones, because they're just, to hit somebody, it's just, so socially antisocial. I'm like, well, great. But the point is you're in a situation where it's already antisocial. So you have to kind of, you're the remedy at that point.
Well, it's the mindset of like, oh, I'm always going to try and talk my way out. But when violence ensues, diplomacy left, right? Like it left the building, and it's done.
And the thing about, with a weapon, whether it's a knife or a stick in particular, a knife is a real equalizer. When I have a son and a daughter, I have two sons and a daughter, and my daughter, I taught her the knife first because, I mean, a stick is very effective, but it takes longer to get effective at it. A knife is, between a stick and a gun, there's your knife. And the knife, it doesn't have the range, obviously, of a gun, but it can really do a lot of damage.
Absolutely.
And so I taught her.
Yeah.
I taught her that. And so, when it comes to, realism, again, if you're training this to be able to defend yourself, you got to go in there with what, you're going to go in there, in a real situation. So, if you got your stick, if you got a stick surrogate, like an umbrella, like a piece of rebar, like a dowel rod or something like that, that's what you're going to work with, and just be able to pick up any weapon or anything like that is weapon-like, and be able to use it and protect yourself, your family, and your loved ones.
And then have the mindset to execute that in real time, which I think training like that really breeds.
Yeah.
And speaking of knives, we got Nigel February from South Africa watching. He said hello to both of us. I want to say hi to you as well, Nigel. And what I want to do next, if it's okay with you, is let's watch this fight that you have going on, and just kind of, we'll watch it. And then if you'll just tell me kind of what's going on in here.
Okay.
These are some training moves, obviously. And then it goes into a fight.
Okay. Oh yeah, I remember this one. This is me and Bert Richardson, and now you'll notice on this he has the heavier headgear on them. There's a first generation headgear, and then there's the fencing masks. And well, actually, I guess the fencing masks are the first, and the heavier headgear, which he's wearing, I made out of sewer grade steel, which means you can drive a Mack truck over and it won't bend. So I had to use a special vise and jig and all that to get it to work properly. But that's actually not Bert. That's someone else. But
that's what was his name again? That's Mark, right?
That was Mark. Yeah.
So there was a lot going on there.
There was.
Tell me what was happening. Oh, whoops! Hold on. Sorry, I just
kind of
you out of the stream.
He wore that helmet. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
Anyway, so I was a little pissed off that he wore the helmet because I wore the soft, the regular standard issue. And so he wore the heavier one, and I'm not sure why. I think later on I found out because he had another shoot or something like that coming up. He didn't want to get all marked up, and I didn't know that. But at the time, I said, I can't stand there and go toe-to-toe with that and trade shots. Not that I would like to do that anyway, but I particularly couldn't. So I just charged him and just put pressure on him. Well, yeah, I think it was his neck that I stepped on. And, that was part of it was, I was trying to, I was kind of going more for his chest at the time, but I was just trying to, avoid getting hit as much as possible. And so I figured once he's on his back, I'll just kind of keep him down there. And that was, why not? That's one way to keep a person down there. But, in retrospect, when I talked to Burton about that afterward, Burton. I kind of I went over and apologized. Hey, I'm sorry, I kind of went off. I asked him, why'd you wear the hard helmet? And then he he actually, this explanation was better later than the one at the time. He said, I just didn't want to get my head hit. And I said, well, okay, but listen, we're in this shot. I'm wearing soft helmet. Whatever I wear, you should wear, and it's mutual. You know, we got the same kind of stick. But I mean, afterwards, you know, again, you get up, and that's part of the training that I did love about what we do. You know, even though, you know, I was in there with a certain mindset. Yeah, I did step on him to keep him down from getting up, and I put a lot of pressure on him. At the same time, we got up, and we're still good friends. And he is one. Yeah,
Now,
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, even then we were. But at that moment, I had a mindset like, I cannot trade shots with this guy, you know, because he's got a hard helmet, and you know, I'm not going to stand there, and because if I'll hit him with a hard shot in the head, and he won't feel it. And those helmets are designed. You can take a shot with a bat with those helmets that I had, and you'll actually hurt your neck more than your head.
wow.
So.
Well,
yeah, but anyway, they're in the Eric's stick fighting museum collection right now. So.
You know, I give every single guy I've ever fought, whether it was in California, one of the gatherings, or the guys out here, win, lose, or draw, I have respect for every single person that I've ever fought against, because the fact that they had the balls to get in there and go fight,
right,
to me just is, and that's one of the things I loved about fighting you. Because, and I'm sure you're used to this, but whenever we brought you out for our events, I wasn't training for anybody else. I was training to beat you, right? Like you were the guy that I was like, I'm training all of my efforts to beat Eric, no matter who else I fight. And you were always just a gentleman afterwards, and just sincere, and it was really about the growth. And that to me means, like, I mean, it's the true brotherhood. It's the true nature of the brotherhood, right?
Well, yeah, stuff like that brings that out. I mean, you talk about camaraderie and all that for everything. I got a low battery signal here, so hopefully it holds on. You talk about the camaraderie and stuff, and that happens because, I mean, it's a really intimate experience trying to take someone's head off, and vice versa.
It is.
And, you know, back to Burton, what he said is that, yeah, this is a very, you know, the one cool thing he liked about what we did is that even though we're taking swings at each other, you know, I mean, I'm trying to take your head off. I mean, no bones about it.
I remember.
You get up, and you shake hands, and you know, give each other a pat in the back, and you go have a beer later, and it's together, and you know, it's that, you know, I want you to push me as, you know, I'm going to push you, and because I know the more you're tested, the better you're going to be in my foxhole should the time come where
we need
to back me up.
Well, and I'll tell you, my scariest fight that I think I ever had, Eric, was honestly the time that you and I went without masks, and everybody was losing their mind. Even guys that had been in the Dog Brothers for a long time, they're like, "Why would you do that? You can jack yourself up," and da 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 da. And for me, the real reason behind it was nobody had done it with you. Nobody in the world had fought Eric Knaus without a mask on. And I remember when I went to you and I said, you know, Eric, you know, and I guess I was kind of trying to gauge it. I'm like, you know, I'm not really going to be hitting you in the face as hard as I would try. And you stopped me and
remember
looked
what
at
I said?
me and you go, oh, yeah, you do that, I'm going to be trying to take your head off.
I said, great. Well, if you want to do that, but I'm really trying to hit you.
Right. And I was like, change of plans. I'm going to try and kill him.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of prayer. I fasted the week before. I did a lot of meditation, and going into that fight was probably, for me, one of the scariest fights that I've ever been in, you know, because
it's a very, and you know, to that, the closest I've come to that was years prior. You know, I hadn't done without the whole Hager, but I mean, basically the fencing masks were when there's a time when I went with Arlen, and we had the same masks, but these tree logs. I mean, these huge sticks. I mean, just baseball bat size rattan, and you feel. I mean, when you and I went without the face mask, you feel a little naked, really, when you go out there. And what's that?
I don't know about you, but I was a lot more cautious. You're not as amped to go in there and freaking like, I like solid food.
Yeah, well, and with you know, the same thing I was telling you before with the heavier sticks, really the fencing mask would have done nothing to protect our heads should one of us have landed. And you know, again, we're throwing bombs, but we're throwing them with caution, because you know, the only thing left to do is either back off and not fight or close altogether, which would be, one strategy. I think at the end when you and I fought, I did close, and that it went to, and then at that point the fight went to the ground. But I mean, to me, that illustrates the point as well that if some even with no headgear protection at all, if one person wants to close and insists on that strategy, it's hard to stop.
It is,
and you
especially
better be.
He's a 6 foot. How tall are you?
6'4".
6'4", 240 something pound guy who's been doing this for 40, 50 years. I remember when we went to the ground, I couldn't get my arm, I couldn't swing anymore. So I just started like rabbit punching you, and you're like, oh yeah, they love that. Keep doing that.
Well, at that point, it wasn't a stick fight. It was us on the ground kind of scrambling. And I thought that was and the crowd was kind of really getting into it. And I was kind of like, yeah, go ahead, enjoy it. Because the stick portion of it was over at that point.
Right.
But it was still, but what you brought up is that, the thing I don't like the direction that some stick fighting has gone is that, caution has been thrown to the wind because of all the protection.
Yeah.
And it's just not realistic. That is not what will happen. And that's not how you will fight. That is not how the fight will end up in your favor or the other person's favor, because you're going to do things that you're used to doing, and what used to be there to protect you just is not there. And you're going to just stumble into, a trap door, and you're going to get screwed.
And a lot of these groups are also becoming very incestuous too, where they're like, we only look at our group, and if you come from the outside, we don't accept you. And it's kind of like it's against what the original design was from the beginning.
Well,
just testing the truth,
yeah,
against anybody.
That's just history repeating itself, because that's the way it was when I started this. It was exactly as you described. And I remember I had a conversation with somebody about this a couple of years ago. I said, I never thought this would happen in my lifetime, but we have gone completely full circle from where it was a bunch of tribes and a bunch of islands and a bunch of, my master is the best, blah, 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 blah. And no, sometimes some do fight, some don't fight, some do limited, things. But it's become very, very, incestuous again. And that's and to me, that's just, it's kind of the cycle that stick fighting goes through. It has a rise, a peak, and then it goes underground again. And it's hard to describe what, the source of it is, but I don't think we're the first ones to have seen it. I just think we're the latest ones.
Yeah.
We didn't, a lot of people say, oh, you discovered this. And no, I didn't discover anything. I just rediscovered, the basic movements and the physicality of, and the reality of what a stick can do, and how a stick is useful, and what it's a surrogate for a sword. It's a surrogate for, whatever other weapon you want to put it. But it's a really practical knowledge, because just about anywhere you go, you can pick up a stick-like object.
Yeah.
And if you are, somewhat versed in it, you're pretty formidable at that point.
Yeah.
And that's where I wanted, that's what I loved about stick fighting. You can roll up a magazine tightly, and it's not a knife, but you can. It's knife-like in terms of the pugilistic side of it. And at the same time, you can thrust, but you can do certain things with it that are knife-ish and be effective against more than one or two people.
We're almost out of time, Eric. I want to touch base on two more topics. One is you came down to Shockwave. A lot of schools are pushing to be more reality-based today, and I think because of threats that are presenting themselves globally, not just here in the U.S. I've seen this all over the world as I've traveled. I always like to get somebody like your opinion and your thoughts on an academy like ours, because you've been doing this for so long and you've tested your stuff. And I mean, obviously we've been friends for a long time, so I'm putting you on the spot here, but tell me your thoughts.
Well, I mean, academies like yours, everything starts at the top. And if the instructor at the top is reality-based, or if the person running it is reality-based, that'll trickle down. And frankly, stick fighting or things like that, it's a tough business, but it's a realistic business. I mean, it's the realistic side of the business that you do, and the genuine people will see that. And so, in your case, for Shockwave, I mean, you're the real deal when it comes. I have, Michael, I have done this. I have seen the stick whiz by my nose and almost take off my head. I've seen the knife come at my jugular, and that's when you and I did the fighting a few times. And to me, that speaks volumes. And you're really way more an exception than the rule, because the rule is not to engage in that at all for a number of reasons. They lose face, maybe I don't know, it'll scare off run a business or something like that. But the thing I liked about Shockwave is that it's reality based. I mean, and the reason it's reality based is because the head guy, the top person, the leader, is reality based himself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm like, yeah, keep talking.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to touch base on is you and I, our location right now is undetermined. We're still working it out. But we're talking about doing a course in June 2020. And we're going to I talked to my buddy who's a Navy SEAL. He's going to be there teaching some dynamic movements for families in case you have to deal with a home invasion. I am working on bringing another gentleman out as well. He hasn't given me a confirmation on that. When he does, I'll mention him. And I'll be there teaching. You'll be there teaching. What are you going to be teaching at this event? And why is it important for everybody who wants reality-based self-defense?
Well, a lot of it would be, look around. What is a weapon? What can you just pick up in your hand just on the fly and use it as a weapon? I mean, if there's nothing around, then hopefully you have some boxing skills or kicking or jiu-jitsu, something. But if it's a typical, room or environment, there's something that you can pick up that you may not have thought about. And so it's going to be more environmentally, what can I pick up that is stick-like, that is knife-like, that is a weapon that I can use to protect? And, a lot of it's going to default to a stick, to a knife-ish weapon, even a pair of pliers, needle nose pliers, which for example, they're great. They're a great weapon, and hopefully you don't have to use it. But there are days you may just have to use it, and
there's days that are needle nose pliers days.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And there's screwdriver days and there are needle nose plier days. And then there's just regular work days. I have a level that I use to level out certain things, and it's made out of metal. And I thought about this. I said, if I ever had to use this as a weapon, how would I use it? So I kind of looked at it here and I said, okay, I could flip it around and hold it like this as a pakal, or I could flip it around and thrust with it to someone's face. Yeah, okay, this will work. It's a little big for the eye socket, but it could certainly, get someone in the mouth. So,
so I'm going to use my level to level you.
Yeah, right. We
will take 2 questions from our viewers. Anybody who wants to shoot out a question, if you're on LinkedIn, unfortunately, we're not able to post live on LinkedIn. They've got some weird live streaming thing that they're working through, and there's an approval process. But if you're on Google, if you're on Facebook, if you're on any of the other ones that we're on, feel free to post your questions, and if you do, we'll answer them. In wrap up, Eric, fighting like competition fighting versus being attacked in the street, what's the difference? What's the big difference there?
Well, there's a big difference. When you're in a ring or in a fighting competition, it's you against one other person. In the street, it is very rarely that. It is you against 2 or 3 other people, or 5 people against 2 people. So the numbers are skewed. They're asymmetrical. So it's going to be you against 2 or 3. Very rarely is it a one-on-one, unless the guy's like a total tweaker or a drunk or something like that. But for some relative in the family who you don't like anyway. But it's usually street scenarios, or they're never fair, because that's the whole point of them. And it's going to be you against more than one person, which is something I would address in our seminar, by the way.
And I think another part of that that's really important is that you don't get to make. A lot of people, I can talk my way out of anything. You can talk your way out of fights. You cannot talk your way out of getting attacked. And you cannot talk your way out of 5 people who want your car or are going to think, I'll just run. But if your family's with you and you just run, you're a douchebag, right? Yep. So you got to stay. You got to stick around and protect your family. You're fighting the elements because you're fighting the environment as well. And I know that
it's not going to be a ring.
Yeah. And I know that in other trainings that I've done, because I've done a couple of private sessions with you, where you talked about that. You're like, look around while you're on the ground, smother him and crawl your opponent over to where the weapon is, right? So that you can get access to it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole mindset and a strategic leveraging that goes along with staying true to reality-based principles. And there's so many opportunities to train them. And I think we live in a culture now where unfortunately people are more scared to train them because of, oh, if you get hit, you'll this. And there's all these, get kicked in the knee, you'll never walk the same. And now we see them doing all of these kicks in the UFC, which is a great arena to be able to see some of that. And I love watching those types of, and I'm just going to say this openly because I always get some clown who comes into my school and says, so do you feel that like MMA is just garbage and that what you do is so much? They're two different worlds, right?
Oh, yeah.
The sport world and the reality. And I want to say like, because when you get punched in the face in the ring, I'm sure it feels very real, right?
Oh, yeah. It's quite real.
It's a real thing, you know?
Yeah.
But they're two different worlds. So if I can just kind of level that out for everybody and get out of the habit of everybody asking me that question. I love being in a scenario where I do reality-based stuff. And I love the fact that UFC and groups, the EFC in Africa are posting and pushing people to go out and test skills. You just have to understand the environments are different. We have a question from Nigel and he says, Eric, how has your method evolved based on soft society we're currently in?
Yeah. Wow. That's a loaded question.
Great question. That's not loaded
it is
at all.
Good one. Yeah. Well, in terms of training people, I guess I think that's what he's referring to. It's the way I train people hasn't really changed. I mean, the type of people come in, whether it's now or 10 years ago, are similar. They're not identical, but they're similar. Back in, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, the people came in, they're just like, you know, I was like the new restaurant in town with like this incredible dish that everybody had to try. And they came out, someone tried and it would be too hot for them. They go, man, I can't do that. And others are like, man, this is what I really want to do. And they're repeat customers. Nowadays, you have to, it's not new anymore like it used to be, but it's still novelty. And so you have people who are like, yeah, I've heard of it. Do you really do this? Do you really hit? I want to, but there's what I've had is interest in a lot from the MMA world, believe it or not. People are training MMA who, that, like you said, that's pretty real. Getting punched or kicked in the head or choked or whatever. That's real. The difference being in the stick fighting that we didn't talk about. Those are one of them. We've done multiple fights as well, or multiple opponents as well. But today, I haven't had to change that much. It's more the approach, particularly when women are involved, because there's the sense that you have these people trying to say, oh, you can defend yourself against an attacker twice your size and twice your strength. I said, no. Reality is, I'm sorry, you cannot. If you have a knife, you can do a lot of damage, a lot more than you can empty hand, for one thing. So my approach with them is to learn something well first. I mean, if you're not in it for the long run, which a lot of people, most of them aren't. I mean, what's the attention span nowadays? A week, maybe, with this stuff. I said, learn one thing well, and not, in terms of a technique, but also the mindset. Like I said, when I teach people, the first speed bump to get over is, oh, it's okay to hit. And then when I train women, once they get over that speed bump, if you will, there's a light that goes on, those who stay with it. And I would say out of, say, 10 women, probably 6 or 7 it'll click. The other 3 will just not, go for it at all. But the others will it'll click. And then, okay, they can hit, and they know that their hits are effective because they've seen what a knife can do.
And so if you don't test it, you don't know what you're capable of doing.
Right.
And then you've got to learn to hit certain areas, because if a woman or a small person, because I want to just make it about a woman, if a woman or a small man or whatever is going against somebody who is 300 pounds and that dude's full of muscle and he's got bad intentions, then you need to figure out what your striking target areas are going to be as well. And then how do you equalize that, right? And a knife is a great way to equalize that. Sticks can be, if you have nothing else, a stick is a great way to equalize that. A rock. Yeah. Part of our defense, we had a whole thing where I did the last time we did a seminar, we did almost an hour just on how to fight with rocks. And it was funny because I was there with this other gentleman. There were 2 Marines, and this guy was just looking at me like I was insane. I'm like, dude, it's reality. Reality is that you go after this guy, and if you can shovel rocks into their mouth while they're yelling at you, trying to harm you on the ground. Hey, that's a tool. If you can use it to crack them in the head, you can use it for grinding. The first cutting instrument was a rock. So you have to learn how to use what you have. Well, Eric, it was awesome having you with us today.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everybody else who joined us. It was a pleasure to have you guys join us, and I'm glad that we got the opportunity to sit down and chat with everybody. And Eric, I'm going to have you hang tight for a second. We're going to go ahead and we'll release the rest of the crew, and you and I will stay on for just a moment.